The day of my parents' will reading dawned bright and cold, sunlight streaming through the mahogany-paneled windows of Wilson and Associates Law Office. I sat quietly in the corner, watching my brother Marcus strut around the room in his tailored suit, already acting like he owned everything in sight. Which, if I was being honest with myself, he probably did. "Miss Sarah Bennett?" The lawyer's voice cut through my thoughts. "Are you ready to proceed?" I nodded, gripping the arms of my leather chair. At 32, I was about to find out what my parents really thought of me, though I already had a pretty good idea. The constant comparisons to Marcus throughout our lives had made that painfully clear. Mr. Wilson adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses and began reading. "To our son Marcus, for his unfailing dedication to the family business and maintaining the Bennett legacy." He went on to list assets that made my head spin. The family estate in Vermont, our summer house in the Hamptons, controlling shares in Bennett Industries, and a portfolio worth millions. Marcus's smirk grew with each item. Then came my part. "To our daughter Sarah." Mr. Wilson paused, shuffling his papers. "We leave the painting Autumn Twilight, currently hanging in the study of our main residence." The room fell silent. Marcus didn't even try to hide his laughter. "A painting?" I managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. "Just a painting?" "It was your mother's favorite," Mr. Wilson offered weakly, clearly uncomfortable with the disparity. Marcus walked over and placed a hand on my shoulder, his grip just tight enough to hurt. "Don't worry, sis. I'll make sure you get a good job in the company. Maybe in the mailroom?" I shrugged off his hand and stood up. The Bennett family fortune, built over 3 generations, now belonged entirely to my brother. All I had was a single painting that my mother had bought at some small gallery years ago. I'd always thought it was pretty, a forest scene at dusk, with strange geometric shapes hidden among the trees, but it wasn't exactly a fair inheritance. "Is that all?" I asked Mr. Wilson. He nodded sympathetically. "The painting must be collected within 7 days." I left without another word, ignoring Marcus's calls behind me. The drive to my parents' house, now Marcus's house, felt surreal. The guards at the gate gave me suspicious looks, but let me through when I explained about the painting. Inside, the housekeeper Margaret met me with tears in her eyes. "Oh, Miss Sarah," she whispered, hugging me tight. "It's not right, what they did to you." I hugged her back, fighting my own tears. Margaret had been more like a mother to me than my own mother sometimes. She helped me take down the painting from the study wall, carefully wrapping it in a blanket. "Your mother used to stare at this for hours," Margaret said softly, "especially in the last few months. Sometimes she'd mutter about numbers and patterns. We thought the illness was making her confused." I looked at the painting more closely. In the fading light of the study, the geometric shapes seemed to shift and change, creating patterns I'd never noticed before. "Numbers?" Margaret nodded. She traced the shapes with her fingers, over and over. Mr. Bennett would get so angry about it. That night, in my small apartment across town, I hung the painting on my living room wall. It was beautiful in its own way. The forest scene was painted with incredible detail, each leaf and branch precisely rendered. But those geometric shapes, they didn't quite fit with the natural elements. They seemed almost deliberate, like they were trying to tell me something. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on my couch, staring at the painting. My mother's final gift to me. Was it really just a cruel joke, a final reminder that I'd never measure up to Marcus? Or was there something more? My phone buzzed. Marcus calling again. I ignored it, like I had his last 5 calls. He probably wanted to gloat more, or maybe offer me that mailroom position. Instead, I opened my laptop and started researching the painting. Autumn Twilight, by an artist named James Morrison. No major exhibitions, no auction records, barely any online presence at all. The gallery where my mother bought it had closed years ago. It was like the painting had appeared out of nowhere. A text from Marcus popped up. "Don't be bitter, sis. Come work for me. It's what Mom and Dad would have wanted." I snorted. What my parents had wanted was for me to be more like Marcus, to care about profit margins and shareholders instead of pursuing my passion for art history and restoration. I'd disappointed them by choosing my own path, and now they'd made their feelings crystal clear. But something about the painting kept drawing my attention. Those shapes, they reminded me of something I'd studied in my art restoration courses. Steganography, the practice of hiding messages in plain sight. I got up and examined the painting more closely. The geometric shapes were subtly different colors than the rest of the scene, barely noticeable unless you were looking for it, and they seemed to form a pattern. A knock at my door made me jump. It was past midnight. Who would be visiting at this hour? Through the peephole, I saw Marcus standing there, his usually perfect hair disheveled. "Sarah," he called out. "Open up. We need to talk about the painting." I stayed silent, watching him through the peephole. He'd never shown any interest in art before. Why was he here now, in the middle of the night, asking about a supposedly worthless painting? "Sarah, please." His voice took on an edge of desperation I'd never heard before. "Mom left instructions about the painting. You need to give it back." Instructions? My heart started pounding. Maybe I wasn't crazy. Maybe there really was something hidden in those geometric shapes. "Go away, Marcus," I called through the door. "The painting is mine. It's all I got, remember?" "You don't understand," he hissed. "That painting, it's not what you think. Give it to me now, and I'll give you $5 million. $5 million? For a painting he'd laughed about just hours ago? I backed away from the door, my mind racing. Marcus was many things, but he wasn't stupid with money. If he was offering that much, the painting must be worth far more. I heard him fumbling with something. Keys? Did he still have a copy of my spare key from when I'd been sick last year? I quickly grabbed the painting off the wall and ran to my bedroom, locking the door behind me just as I heard my front door open. "Sarah." Marcus's voice echoed through my apartment. "Where are you? Where's the painting?" I held the painting close, my hands shaking. In the dim light of my bedroom, those geometric shapes seemed to glow faintly. And then I saw it, a pattern I'd missed before. The shapes weren't random at all. They formed numbers, hidden so cleverly in the forest scene that you'd never notice unless you knew exactly what to look for. "Sarah." Marcus was getting closer. "Think about what you're doing. That painting is worth more than you can imagine." I turned the painting over, inspecting the back. The original canvas was professionally mounted, but something about the framing felt off. A slight gap that shouldn't be there. My bedroom door handle jiggled. "Sarah, open this door right now." With trembling fingers, I'd pried at the gap in the frame. A small piece of paper fluttered out, covered in my mother's elegant handwriting. As I read the first line, my breath caught in my throat. "My dearest Sarah, if you're reading this, you've discovered what I always knew you would. You see patterns others miss. You question what others accept. And now, my darling girl, you're about to understand why your father and brother have always been so afraid of you." The pounding on my bedroom door grew louder, but I barely heard it. I was too busy reading my mother's letter, my hands shaking as each word revealed a truth that would change everything. The numbers in the painting weren't just random shapes. They were coordinates, accounts, and passwords to something that would shake the very foundation of Bennett Industries. And my brother, still shouting outside my door, had no idea that his perfect world was about to crumble. I don't know how long I sat there on my bedroom floor, reading and rereading my mother's letter, while Marcus continued his tirade outside. My hands trembled as I absorbed each carefully written word. The numbers in the painting, when combined with the access codes I've included here, will lead you to the truth about Bennett Industries. Your father and brother built their empire on stolen innovations, patents and designs taken from brilliant minds who trusted them. I was one of those minds, Sarah. And you, my dear daughter, were always meant to be my successor. A loud crash from my living room jolted me back to reality. Marcus had apparently gotten tired of asking nicely. "I'm calling the police," I shouted, already dialing 911. "Go ahead," Marcus yelled back. "I'll tell them you stole company property. That painting belongs to Bennett Industries." But I knew better now. The letter explained everything. How my mother had been a brilliant inventor in her own right. How she hidden her work in plain sight all these years. The painting wasn't just art. It was a key to a hidden database of evidence. "The coordinates will lead you to my private laboratory," the letter continued. "Everything you need is there. But be careful, Sarah. Your father and brother will do anything to keep their secrets buried." I heard Marcus's footsteps retreating, followed by my front door slamming. Taking a deep breath, I emerged from my bedroom. My apartment was a mess. Marcus had apparently searched every corner looking for the painting. But I didn't care about the chaos. I had work to do. First, I photographed every inch of the painting, capturing the geometric shapes from every angle. Then I carefully copied down the coordinates from my mother's letter. According to her instructions, I needed to overlay the shapes in a specific sequence to reveal the full set of access codes. My phone buzzed again, this time with a text from Margaret, our old housekeeper. "Miss Sarah, men are at the house removing all your mother's things. They're looking for something in her study. Please be careful." They were destroying evidence. I had to move fast. The coordinates led to a location in the Berkshires, about 3 hours from the city. My mother had written that she purchased the property under her maiden name, keeping it hidden from my father and brother. "The lab is underground," her letter explained. "The entrance looks like an old storm cellar, but it's equipped with state-of-the-art security. Use the first sequence of numbers from the painting to gain access." I packed quickly, laptop, the painting carefully wrapped in blankets, some clothes, and my mother's letter. As I headed to my car, I noticed a black SUV parked across the street, its engine running. Marcus wasn't done yet. The drive to the Berkshires was tense. The SUV followed me for the first hour, keeping a consistent distance. I took every detour and back road I could think of, finally losing them somewhere near the Massachusetts border. By the time I reached the coordinates, it was nearly dawn. The property looked abandoned at first glance, just an overgrown field with an old farmhouse in severe disrepair. But as I walked the grounds, comparing the geometric shapes in the painting to the natural landscape, I realized my mother's genius. The shapes weren't just numbers, they were a map. The seemingly random patterns of trees and rocks matched the artwork perfectly. The storm cellar was exactly where the painting indicated. Its rusted doors looked like they hadn't been opened in decades, but when I input the first sequence into a hidden keypad, they smoothly swung open to reveal a staircase descending into darkness. Motion sensor lights flickered on as I made my way down. The temperature dropped with each step, and I could hear the soft hum of ventilation systems. At the bottom, another keypad waited. This time, I needed to use the second sequence from the painting. The laboratory that emerged from the darkness took my breath away. It was like stepping into a different world. Pristine white walls, advanced equipment, and rows of computers humming quietly. But what caught my eye was the wall of patents and prototypes. Dozens of innovations that I recognized from Bennett Industries products, but with one crucial difference. They all bore my mother's original signature. "Oh my God," I whispered, moving closer to examine them. These weren't just similar to Bennett Industries technology. They were the originals. My mother hadn't just been a passive observer in the company. She had been its hidden genius. A familiar voice behind me made my blood run cold. "Impressive, isn't it?" I spun around to find my father standing in the doorway, looking exactly as he had the day he died, or at least, the day we thought he died. Marcus stood beside him, a satisfied smirk on his face. "Did you really think your mother was the only one who knew about this place?" my father asked, stepping into the lab. Though I must admit, hiding the coordinates in that painting was clever. We've been searching for this facility for months. I backed away, clutching my mother's letter. "You're supposed to be dead." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Sometimes the best way to find something is to make people stop looking for it. Your mother's death was unfortunately real, but mine? Well, let's just say it served its purpose. The will reading was a trap, I realized. You wanted me to find the painting. "We needed you to leave us here," Marcus explained, moving to block the exit. "Mom changed all the security protocols before she died. We couldn't get in without the codes. And now," my father said, advancing slowly, "you're going to help us destroy everything in this lab. All evidence of your mother's work will disappear, and Bennett Industries' patents will remain secure." But they had made one crucial mistake. While they were talking, I had been backing toward my mother's main workstation. Her letter had mentioned an emergency protocol, a sequence of numbers that would activate something she called the Clarity Protocol. "Actually," I said, reaching behind me to input the sequence, "I don't think I will." The lab's lights suddenly shifted to a pulsing red, and a computerized voice announced, "Clarity Protocol activated. Broadcasting evidence to all major news outlets and regulatory agencies. Deletion impossible." My father's face contorted with rage. "What have you done?" "Mom called it her insurance policy," I said, feeling stronger with each word. "Every piece of evidence in this lab has just been transmitted to hundreds of secure locations. Patents, proof of theft, fraudulent documents, everything. Bennett Industries is about to face some very uncomfortable questions." Marcus lunged forward, but it was too late. Alarms began blaring, and the lab's security systems activated, sealing all exits. We were locked in, together with the truth that would destroy their empire. "She knew," I continued, watching their faces pale. "She knew you would try to bury her contributions, just like you buried her innovations. So she made sure the truth would come out, one way or another." Through the lab's small windows, I could see police lights approaching. Someone, probably the lab's security system, had alerted local authorities. My father and Marcus exchanged panicked looks as the sound of sirens grew closer. The painting that had started everything still sat wrapped in blankets by the door. Those seemingly worthless geometric shapes had led me exactly where I needed to go. My mother's final gift wasn't just a painting, it was justice. And as I watched my father and brother realize their perfect world was crumbling, I smiled, knowing this was just the beginning. The real story of Bennett Industries was about to be told, and this time, no one would be able to hide the truth. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of police statements, news reports, and corporate chaos. I watched from my hotel room as Bennett Industries stock plummeted. Years of carefully constructed lies unraveling in real time. Bennett Industries CEO found alive, arrested for fraud. The headlines screamed. Corporate giant built on stolen patents. Mother's revenge. The hidden genius behind Bennett Tech. My phone hadn't stopped ringing since the story broke. Journalists, lawyers, former employees, everyone wanted to hear my side of the story. But I was only interested in one call. Margaret, our former housekeeper, who had more revelations to share. Your mother knew this day would come, she told me, her voice heavy with emotion. That's why she made me promise to give you this after the truth came out. An hour later, I sat in Margaret's small living room, holding another letter from my mother. This one was different, not instructions or coordinates, but a story. Her story. My dearest Sarah, it began. Now that you know the truth about Bennett Industries, it's time you understood your own history. You were never less than your brother. You were always meant for something more. As I read, the pieces of my life slowly shifted into focus. My mother hadn't been just another victim of my father's schemes. She had been playing a long game, preparing me for this moment from the very beginning. Those art history classes I'd taken, they weren't a waste of time as my father had claimed. They had trained my eye to spot patterns, to understand hidden meanings in plain sight. My work in restoration had taught me patience, precision, and the ability to reconstruct truth from fragments. Every time your father pushed you away from the business, my mother wrote, every time he favored Marcus, he was unknowingly helping to prepare you for this moment. You learned to think differently, to see what others missed. While Marcus was learning to maintain the lies, you were learning to expose them. A knock at Margaret's door interrupted my reading. A woman in a crisp suit stood outside, holding a briefcase. Ms. Bennett, I'm Alexander Chen from the SEC. We need to discuss your mother's patents. The next few hours were a crash course in just how extensive my mother's preparations had been. She hadn't just documented the stolen patents. She had continued inventing, working in secret in her underground lab. The painting's coordinates had led not only to evidence of past theft, but to innovations that could transform the industry. Your mother filed these patents under a trust, Alexandra explained, spreading documents across Margaret's coffee table, a trust that names you as the sole beneficiary. My hands trembled as I looked at the paperwork. Dozens of patents, all legally protected, all now belonging to me. Not just the old innovations my father had stolen, but new ones, years ahead of current technology. Bennett Industries doesn't just owe you restitution for the stolen patents, Alexandra continued. They've built their entire infrastructure around your mother's technology. They can't operate without it. So what does that mean? I asked, though I was beginning to understand. It means, Ms. Bennett, that you now effectively control the company that cast you aside. While my father and Marcus sat in jail awaiting trial, I walked into Bennett Industries headquarters the next morning not as the forgotten daughter, but as its new owner. The board of directors, desperate to save the company from complete collapse, had no choice but to accept my terms. Standing in my father's former office, I found another surprise, a wall safe hidden behind the painting that had once hung there. The combination? The final sequence of numbers from my mother's painting. Inside was a personal diary detailing every innovation he had stolen, every inventor he had betrayed. But more importantly, it contained a list of names, people like my mother who had been cheated out of their rightful recognition. 1 month later, I stood on a stage at a hastily convened press conference announcing the company's new direction. Bennett Industries was built on stolen dreams, I told the assembled crowd. Today we begin making things right. We're establishing a foundation to compensate every inventor who was wronged by the previous management. But more than that, we're transforming the company into what it should have been all along, an incubator for innovation, where brilliant minds are celebrated, not exploited. The painting that started it all now hangs in my new office, a reminder that sometimes the most valuable things are hidden in plain sight. The geometric shapes that once concealed my mother's secret now represent something else, the pattern of a better future, one built on truth instead of lies. Marcus wrote to me from prison, alternating between threats and pleas for help. I sent back a single photograph. The painting, now hanging exactly where our father's portrait used to be. He would understand the message. His world of deception was over. My father maintained his silence, but it didn't matter anymore. The truth he had fought so hard to bury was now his legacy. The great John Bennett would be remembered not as a visionary businessman, but as a thief who stole his own wife's genius. Late one evening, as I was preparing to leave the office, Margaret brought me one final letter from my mother. This one had been timed to arrive exactly 1 month after the company's transformation began. My darling Sarah, it read, if you're reading this, you've done more than just expose the truth. You've begun to rebuild from the ashes of deception. I never wanted you to inherit a corrupt empire. I wanted you to have the chance to build something honest, something worthy of your heart. I traced my fingers over her handwriting, feeling closer to her than ever before. The worthless painting had been anything but worthless. It had been the key to everything. More than that, it had been my mother's way of showing me that I had inherited something far more valuable than money or status. I had inherited her vision for a better world. 2 years later, Bennett Industries, now renamed Aurora Innovations, is unrecognizable from what it once was. We've become a leader not just in technology, but in ethical business practices. The foundation has helped dozens of inventors reclaim their stolen innovations, and our incubator program has launched countless new careers. The painting still hangs in my office, its geometric shapes now a familiar comfort. Sometimes, late at night, I could swear they shift slightly, as if my mother is still there, leaving me new patterns to unravel, new truths to discover. But the most important truth was there all along, hidden in plain sight, just like those numbers. Success built on lies will always crumble, but success built on truth and justice will stand the test of time. Marcus was released from prison last week. He sent me a message asking to meet, to talk about rebuilding our family. I haven't responded yet. Some patterns, I've learned, are better left unchanged. Instead, I spend my time focusing on the future. The company hosts an annual innovation fair where young inventors can showcase their ideas without fear of theft. Last year's winner was a young woman whose story reminded me of my mother. Brilliant, underestimated, but unwavering in her vision. As I handed her the award, I saw my mother's painting reflected in the glass trophy. The geometric shapes seemed to dance with approval, reminding me that sometimes the greatest inheritances aren't the ones we can hold in our hands, but the ones that transform us from within. The worthless painting had given me something priceless. The truth about my past, control of my future, and most importantly, the chance to ensure that no other brilliant mind would ever be silenced or stolen from again. And that, I know, would make my mother prouder than any fortune ever could. The Wilson family's annual reunion was exactly as suffocating as I remembered. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead in my aunt's oversized mansion, reflecting off designer dresses and expensive watches. The air was thick with the peculiar mix of expensive perfume and superiority that seemed to follow my relatives everywhere they went. I stood in the corner, watching my cousins compete for attention with stories of their latest achievements. My simple black dress, carefully chosen to help me blend into the background, felt like armor against their judgment. "Olivia," my Aunt Patricia's voice cut through the chatter. "I almost didn't see you there. Still working as a secretary, dear." I took a small sip of champagne, hiding my smile behind the glass. "Administrative assistant, actually." "Oh," she raised a perfectly manicured eyebrow. "Still at that little consulting firm? What was it called again?" "Summit Solutions," I replied quietly. My cousin Ethan, fresh from making partner at his father's law firm, couldn't resist joining in. "Come on, Liv. I could get you a real job, something with actual career potential." I thought about the stack of contracts waiting for my signature back at my office. My real office, not the carefully maintained cover I showed the world. "I'm happy where I am, thanks." "Happy?" Aunt Patricia's laugh could have cut glass. "Darling, you're wasting your potential. Your cousins are all executives, partners, real business people, and you're still pushing paper for someone else. If only they knew that someone else was me." The story of how I built my empire in secret started 10 years ago, in this very house. I was fresh out of business school, armed with an MBA and a revolutionary idea for restructuring failing companies. I'd spent months perfecting my pitch, convinced that my family's vast business connections would help launch my career. Instead, they laughed. "Consulting?" Uncle Robert had scoffed. "Leave that to the big firms, girl. Join the family business. Start in the mailroom. Work your way up like everyone else." Everyone else meant my male cousins, of course. The Wilson family's idea of success was strictly defined and strictly controlled. They'd built their fortune through a network of companies, each headed by a carefully chosen male heir. Women were expected to marry well or take subordinate positions, nothing more. That night, I made 2 decisions that would change everything. First, I would build my own company without their help or knowledge. Second, I would make them regret every dismissive word. Summit Solutions began in a tiny office above a Chinese restaurant. My savings covered the rent, barely. But I had something more valuable than money. I understood how companies worked, how they failed, and most importantly, how to fix them. My first client was a small manufacturing firm on the verge of bankruptcy. The owner had been turned down by every major consulting firm in the city. I spent 3 months restructuring their operations, streamlining processes, and negotiating with creditors. 6 months later, they were profitable again. Word spread quietly through business circles about the mysterious consulting firm that could save dying companies. I hired carefully, choosing people who shared my vision and my discretion. Every employee signed ironclad NDAs. My name never appeared on any public documents. I was simply the CEO. As Summit Solutions grew, I maintained my cover as a low-level employee. I kept the tiny office above the restaurant, even as we expanded into a sleek downtown headquarters. When family members asked about my job, I described mundane administrative tasks, watching their eyes glaze over with disinterest. The deception wasn't just about pride, it was strategy. The Wilson family's business empire was built on acquiring struggling companies at rock-bottom prices. My firm's specialty was saving those same companies before they became vulnerable to hostile takeovers. We worked in the shadows, quietly thwarting my family's predatory practices while building our own success. Now, 10 years later, Summit Solutions was one of the most influential consulting firms in the industry. We had offices in 12 cities, a client list that included Fortune 500 companies, and a reputation for turning failing businesses into success stories. And not one of my smirking relatives had any idea. More champagne, dear. Aunt Patricia's voice yanked me back to the present. Though perhaps you should stick to water. I imagine your salary doesn't leave much room for expensive tastes. I accepted the champagne with a practiced smile. Thank you, Aunt Patricia. How's Uncle Robert's new acquisition going? Williams Manufacturing, wasn't it? Her smile faltered slightly. There have been some complications. Nothing Robert can't handle, of course. What she didn't know was that those complications were my doing. Williams Manufacturing had been a target of my uncle's hostile takeover attempt. They'd reached out to Summit Solutions 3 months ago, desperate for help. Now they were implementing our restructuring plan, their stock price was rising, and Uncle Robert's attempt to seize control was falling apart. I heard they hired some consulting firm, my cousin Ethan added. Probably throwing good money after bad. Those consultants are all the same. Big promises, no results. I hid another smile. Summit Solutions' fee for saving Williams Manufacturing was more than Ethan would make in 5 years at his father's firm. Oh, which firm? Summit something, he waved dismissively. Nobody important. Dad says their CEO won't even show their face. Probably some trust fund kid playing at business. My phone buzzed in my clutch. A message from my actual assistant. Emergency meeting tomorrow, 9 a.m. Wilson Ventures representatives requesting merger discussion Williams Manufacturing. Urgent response needed. I scanned the message twice, realization dawning. They were finally admitting defeat with Williams Manufacturing. After failing to acquire the company, they were now seeking a merger, which would require approval from Williams' consulting firm. My firm. Tomorrow morning, my family would walk into a meeting expecting to strong-arm their way into a merger. Instead, they would find themselves facing the secretary they dismissed for the past decade. Except I wouldn't be bringing coffee. I would be sitting at the head of the table. Everything all right, dear? Aunt Patricia asked, noticing my expression. I finished my champagne and gave her my brightest smile. Perfect, actually. I should head home. Early meeting tomorrow. Oh? Taking notes for someone important? Something like that. I replied, already planning what I would wear. Something exactly like that. The next morning, I stood in my private elevator, ascending to Summit Solutions' executive floor. Gone was the simple black dress from last night's reunion. Today, I wore a tailored channel suit in deep navy, a power color for a power move. My assistant, Maya, waited at the elevator doors with a tablet and knowing smile. The Wilson Ventures team arrived early, she reported as we walked. Your uncle seems particularly anxious to meet Summit's CEO. I'm sure he is. I checked my reflection in a glass wall. Perfect. Are they in the main conference room? Yes, along with Mr. Harrison from Williams Manufacturing. Maya's eyes sparkled with anticipation. Your cousin Ethan is there too. Apparently, he insisted on handling the legal aspects personally. I smiled, remembering Ethan's condescending offer of a real job just yesterday. Who else from the family? Your Aunt Patricia came as moral support, though she's not officially part of the meeting. And your cousin James, he's representing Wilson Ventures' finance department. A perfect audience. I checked my watch. 8:57 a.m. Had they been served coffee? Your aunt complained that there was no one to serve it. Maya's grin widened. I told them the administrative assistant would be in shortly. I almost laughed. For 10 years, I'd played the role of invisible support staff whenever family members visited the office. They never looked closely at the quiet woman who brought their coffee or took their coats. It had been the perfect cover. "Give me 2 minutes," I said, "then bring in the contracts." I could hear voices through the conference room's heavy doors. My uncle's authoritative tone, Aunt Patricia's sharp laugh, Ethan's smug commentary. Taking a deep breath, I pushed the doors open. The conversation stopped abruptly. My uncle sat at one end of the long table, apparently having assumed the power position. Ethan and James flanked him, both in expensive suits that screamed family money. Aunt Patricia perched nearby, examining her manicure with practiced disinterest. Mr. Harrison from Williams Manufacturing sat alone on the other side, looking uncomfortable. Finally, Aunt Patricia sighed. "We've been waiting for coffee for." She stopped, really looking at me for the first time. "Olivia? What are you wearing? And why aren't you carrying coffee?" I walked calmly to the head of the table, the seat directly opposite Uncle Robert. "I don't serve coffee anymore, Aunt Patricia. In fact, I never really did." "What is this?" Uncle Robert demanded. "Where is Summit's CEO? We were promised a meeting with the actual decision maker." "You have been." I sat down, enjoying the confusion on their faces. "I am the CEO of Summit Solutions. I have been since I founded the company 10 years ago." The silence that followed was deafening. Ethan's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. James dropped his pen. Aunt Patricia's perfectly maintained composure cracked. Uncle Robert recovered first, his face reddening. "This is absurd. You're a secretary." "No," I said calmly. "That was a cover. A very effective one, apparently, since none of you ever looked past it. You were so convinced I couldn't be successful that you never noticed I already was." Maya chose that moment to enter with a stack of contracts. She distributed them efficiently, then took her place standing behind my chair. "These documents," I continued, "outline the terms under which Summit Solutions will consider approving the merger between Wilson Ventures and Williams Manufacturing." "Consider approving?" Ethan sputtered. "You can't be serious. This is a joke, right? Some kind of elaborate prank?" I pulled out my phone and projected Summit's latest financial statements onto the wall screen. Summit Solutions currently manages over $12 billion in client assets. We have a 94% success rate in corporate restructuring, and our approval is required for any major changes to Williams Manufacturing's business structure. I smiled at my stunned relatives. "Does that look like a joke to you?" "This is impossible," Aunt Patricia whispered. "You're nothing. You've always been nothing." "That's exactly what you were meant to think." I turned to Mr. Harrison. "Would you like to explain to my family why you chose Summit Solutions over Wilson Ventures' original offer?" Mr. Harrison straightened in his chair. "Summit's reputation is unparalleled. When Wilson Ventures attempted their hostile takeover, Summit's restructuring plan saved our company. We've increased profits by 47% since implementing their strategies." "Restructuring plan?" James looked like he might faint. "The plan that destroyed our acquisition attempt. That was you, among others." I began listing cases on my fingers. Peterson Electronics, which you tried to acquire last year. Maritime Shipping, which you underbid on last quarter. The Davidson Group, which mysteriously recovered just before you could buy them out. I leaned forward. For 10 years, I've been quietly undermining every predatory acquisition attempt your company has made. Uncle Robert's face had turned an alarming shade of purple. You deliberately sabotaged family business. No, I corrected. I built my own business, one that helps companies survive instead of devouring them for parts. The fact that it interfered with your plans was just karmic bonus. This is ridiculous, Ethan declared, standing up. I'm calling our lawyers. Sit down, Ethan. My voice carried an authority that made him freeze. You really should read those contracts in front of you, the ones your firm spent months trying to secure for this meeting. I watched realization dawn on his face. That's right. Your law firm's biggest client this year. That was me too. Maya stepped forward with another document. This is a summary of Summit's current market position and liquid assets. You'll note that we're now in a position to acquire controlling interest in Wilson Ventures if we choose. The room erupted in chaos. Aunt Patricia was practically hyperventilating. James was frantically checking the numbers on his phone. Ethan had collapsed back into his chair, looking shell-shocked. This is blackmail, Uncle Robert growled. No, I said quietly. This is business. The kind you taught me, I'd never be capable of handling. I stood up, smoothing my jacket. You have until 5 p.m. today to review the merger terms. They're very generous, considering our position. If you decline, Summit Solutions will begin purchasing Wilson Ventures stock on the open market tomorrow morning. I headed for the door, then paused. Oh, and Aunt Patricia, that champagne you so graciously offered me last night. I own the vineyard that produces it. Bought it last year. The coffee you were so desperate for this morning. That chain too. I smiled sweetly. Turns out my salary does leave room for expensive tastes after all. The door closed behind me on their stunned faces. In my private office, I finally allowed myself a moment to process what had just happened. 10 years of careful deception, of playing the invisible underachiever, had led to this moment. Maya appeared with a real cup of coffee, my favorite blend from my own coffee chain. Was it worth the wait? I thought about all the times I'd served coffee in this very office, watching my family dismiss me, underestimate me, write me off as nothing more than a secretary. Every single second. My phone buzzed. Messages already pouring in from family members who must have heard about the meeting. I silenced it without looking. They'd have plenty of time to process their new reality. Right now, I had an empire to run. And for the first time in 10 years, I could finally do it without hiding who I really was. The next 48 hours were exactly what you'd expect when a family built on power and appearances suddenly discovers they're not at the top of the food chain anymore. The messages started pouring in almost immediately after the meeting. Aunt Patricia, darling, let's discuss this over lunch. You always were my favorite niece. Ethan, come on, Liv. We were just joking around. Families should stick together. James, you can't do this to us. We're blood. I ignored them all, focusing instead on the rapid-fire emails from Wilson Ventures board members. They weren't stupid. They could see which way the wind was blowing. By noon, they had scheduled an emergency board meeting. By 3, they had voted to accept Summit's merger terms. Uncle Robert, predictably, didn't go quietly. You've betrayed this family. His voice echoed through my office as he barged in unannounced. Maya moved to intervene, but I waved her off. Let him have his moment. Actually, I said, not looking up from my computer, I'd say I learned from this family. Isn't this exactly what you taught us? Seize power, eliminate competition, Never show weakness. We gave you everything. That made me laugh. You gave me nothing, less than nothing. You taught me that I would never be good enough, that my only value was in supporting the men in the family. So I built something better. By deceiving everyone for a decade, I finally looked up at him. By letting you deceive yourselves, you saw exactly what you expected to see. A quiet, unambitious woman who knew her place. That was your mistake, not mine. The fight seemed to drain out of him suddenly. He sank into one of my visitor chairs, looking older than I'd ever seen him. Why reveal yourself now? You could have continued operating in secret. Because it was time. I closed my laptop. Williams Manufacturing isn't the only company you're trying to acquire. There's Thompson Electronics, Maritime Solutions, at least 3 others. Companies with good people, solid products, that just need help restructuring. I'm tired of watching you destroy them. It's business, he protested weakly. No, it's greed, and it stops now. I handed him a folder. These are the final merger terms. Summit Solutions will acquire a controlling interest in Wilson Ventures. We'll restructure the company to focus on building businesses up, not tearing them down. You can stay on as a consultant if you accept the new direction. If not, your golden parachute is outlined on page 3. He opened the folder with trembling hands. You thought of everything. I learned from the best. I smiled without warmth, though not in the way you intended. After he left, Maya brought in a stack of newspapers. Summit's revelation was already making headlines. Secret CEO revealed how one woman built a billion-dollar empire in secret. Wilson family shocked. The hidden success story they never saw coming. My phone buzzed again, this time with a message that actually mattered. My mother, who had divorced Uncle Robert's brother years ago and distanced herself from the Wilson family's toxicity, had sent a single line. I always knew you would show them. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of changes. Wilson Ventures board enthusiastically embraced Summit's new direction. Their stock price jumped 40% on the announcement of the merger. Companies that had feared the Wilson name now sought partnerships. The press couldn't get enough of the story. Aunt Patricia tried to spin it as a heartwarming family success story. We always knew Olivia had potential, she told one reporter. This just proves that the Wilson spirit of entrepreneurship runs in the blood. I responded by releasing archived video of last year's family reunion, where she had spent 20 minutes explaining to everyone why I would never amount to anything. The footage went viral. She stopped giving interviews after that. Ethan attempted damage control in his own way, claiming he had been in on it all along. Unfortunately for him, too many people had witnessed his shocked face in that conference room. His law firm's other clients began questioning his judgment. Within a month, he was quietly asked to take a leave of absence. James adapted the fastest, approaching me with a business proposal just 2 weeks after the revelation. We could dominate the market together, he suggested over an awkward lunch. The Wilson Summit Alliance would be unstoppable. That's not what Summit Solutions is about, I told him. We don't dominate, we elevate. The real changes came in the quieter moments. The young intern who tearfully thanked me for showing her that success didn't require compromising her principles. The female executives who started reaching out, sharing their own stories of being underestimated. The business schools that invited me to speak about building ethical success in a cutthroat world. 3 months after the revelation, I stood on a stage accepting the Business Innovation Award. Looking out at the audience, I saw my mother sitting in the front row, beaming with pride. Behind her sat several of my former administrative assistants, all women who had helped maintain my cover while building their own careers within Summit. Success isn't about who has the most power, I told the crowd. It's about how you use the power you have. For 10 years, I played a role that made powerful people underestimate me. I could have revealed myself sooner, but I chose to wait until Summit Solutions was strong enough to create real change. The applause was thunderous, but the real satisfaction came later that evening. I was working late in my office when Maya brought in an interesting piece of news. Uncle Robert had just announced his retirement. His resignation letter included an unexpected paragraph. My niece taught me that true business success isn't measured in acquisitions or assets, but in the positive impact we create. I regret that it took losing control of my company to learn this lesson. I leaned back in my chair, thinking about the long game I had played. 10 years of careful planning, of swallowing pride and playing small, had led to this moment. Summit Solutions wasn't just successful, it was changing how business was done. The next family reunion would certainly be interesting. I planned to host it myself, in Summit's main conference room. The same room where I had served coffee countless times, watching and waiting for the perfect moment to show them who I really was. Maya knocked on my door. "Your 4 p.m. is here. The CEO of Thomson Electronics, the company your uncle was trying to acquire." I smiled. "Show them in. And Maya? Bring coffee for everyone. The good stuff from our chain." As I stood to greet my visitors, I caught my reflection in the window. No more hiding, no more playing small. I had built something remarkable, not despite my family's dismissal, but because of it. They had taught me that power doesn't always look like what people expect. Sometimes it looks like a quiet woman in a simple black dress, serving coffee and taking notes, while building an empire right under everyone's nose. The tabloids called it revenge. The business papers called it strategic genius. But for me, it was simply justice, served one corporate takeover at a time, with a side of perfectly brewed coffee. And somewhere, in a small office above a Chinese restaurant, my original desk still sits. I keep it as a reminder that success doesn't always wear designer labels or demand attention. Sometimes it works quietly, patiently, building something extraordinary while the world looks the other way. That's the real secret to success, not the power you show, but the power you build when no one's watching.